This video begins with a sort of allegory, even though, ironically or not, one of the major purposes of this video is to try to lead the audience to think about these political and philosophical problems less allegorically. When I was growing up, I knew a great many martial arts experts. I believe this was just a coincidence. Obviously, you could make the argument that I got to know more guys who were serious about martial arts because I became a scholar of Buddhism myself. I studied Asian languages myself. I was putting myself in the right situations to meet these people. But to a large extent, it was just a coincidence. And it also reflected that kung fu and ninjutsu and these things, these are fairly popular pastimes. Perhaps not at the same level as yoga, but what percentage of the population today has some training in the martial arts? What percentage of the population devotes 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, whether it be to karate, jujitsu, kung fu, or what have you? Anyway, one of these guys who I knew quite well. I mean, we were close enough that I knew his whole life story. He shared with me, his struggles with his own parents and grandparents, that kind of thing. He talked to me about his emotional and personal life. We were close enough to that extent. Um, he had gotten involved, especially in the Japanese martial arts, inclusive of ninjutsu, at one of these dojos that really openly advertised itself as serious. This was not a place for overweight people just trying to do some kind of exercise that will help them with their weight loss. There were other martial arts clubs for that. This was not a martial arts club for so-called fighting sports. Like if you want to go to the Olympics, if you want to train in judo as an Olympic sport, no, wrong club. This was a club that openly advertised itself as teaching you techniques that were deadly. May sound like a small or subtle difference, but do you go to a martial arts club that instructs you in climbing a wall, that instructs you in how to climb in someone's window, that instructs you on how to kill someone, whether it be with a belt or your bare hands or what have you? There are many things once you get into it that immediately distinguish serious martial arts in this sense from recreational martial arts. Now, who do you think showed up? What kind of people did he meet at this martial arts club, which was in Canada? This was a predominantly white Western phenomenon. He himself was actually not a white person. He was Middle Eastern, but I think he was probably perceived as white until he told people that he was actually of Middle Eastern or Arabic ancestry. This is in Canada, but this particular club he was a member of, it became famous enough to attract visitors from Japan, from the United States, to some extent from around the world. And he spent so much time with these guys at this club, he actually learned a fair bit of spoken Japanese. Now, you may or may not know this about Japanese. Firstly, there's a huge gap between written Japanese and spoken. But Japanese is a language with many peculiar dialects and particular shibboleths that give away who you are and where you're from. In World War II, many books remark on this. There really was a separate dialect called military dialect. And still to this day, actors training to be in Japanese movies often have to learn the peculiar grammatical structure that's associated with organized crime in Japan. The Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, however you want to put it. Well, he started learning Japanese while spending all these hours at this martial arts club and going out to drink alcohol with these guys he was meeting at the club and so on. And he said that when he talked to normal Japanese tourists, they were shocked they looked at him with complete astonishment. And it was because he wasn't speaking normal Japanese. It was obvious to them, native speakers of the language, that he was, despite being seemingly a white Western person, he was speaking one of the dialects that really distinctively identified you as being in organized crime. Unless, of course, you make the effort to conceal it. I assume that career criminals in Japan, they talk that way amongst themselves. And when they go to buy groceries or something, they shift their accent or shift their manner of speaking a little bit. My point is this. It's possible the owner of that martial arts club has never killed anyone in his life, has no blood on his hands whatsoever. It's possible, let's just say speculatively, but this isn't much of a speculation. It's possible the owner of that martial arts club was just frustrated and disappointment with going to so many other gyms, so many other martial arts clubs that weren't really serious and that weren't really teaching Japanese martial arts in a way that was historically authentic. And he thought, okay, look, I'm going to open a martial arts club and we don't do the weight loss and we don't do kind of a daycare center for kids. It's not going to be fun for the whole family. It's not going to be saying to parents, hey, leave your kids here and let them learn karate. Well, you go off and do the grocery shopping or something. It's quite possible he just wanted a serious martial arts club because he felt it was something lacking in his own life or lacking in the free market, so to speak, in that part of Canada. Well, whether or not you recruit these people, whether or not you think yourself is actively catering to these people, who do you think is going to show up? This guy I met, he was reasonably good friends with for a reasonable length of time. Because of his own totally childish interest in the martial arts and, his progression through higher and higher levels of ability, he ended up at this club really meeting and spending time with men who were professional killers. He really spent time with people who were in organized crime, not just by happenstance, not short term, but as their career. And as you can imagine, he commented, there were certain types of guys you met at that gym, you met at that dojo that you really wanted to stay away from. There were certain types of guys who were scary to be in the same room with. And there were other guys, where he really appreciated meeting them and really valued the time he'd spent with them and hearing from their perspective. Okay. I have been warning on this YouTube channel for 8 years about the consequences of, in this way, passively recruiting people through your political, ideological, and religious statements on the internet and in organizing a political movement. Right now, I care about democracy and I'm morally opposed to communism. If I set up a foundation in Florida and I start openly saying, hey, look, this is not one of those rinky-dink, fun for the whole family, anti-communist organizations. We're really serious about supporting democracy. We support military intervention. We support deploying the U.S. Army, the CIA, whatever it takes in order to eliminate the regime of Fidel Castro in Cuba and replace it with some kind of reasonably working democracy. Today, 2022, if I set up that organization, even if I have the best of intentions, and again, quite possibly, like this owner of a karate dojo or ninjutsu dojo, whatever I've described, maybe I'm doing that without giving any thought to who's going to show up, who's going to join. Maybe I'm doing that because I feel like, I'm tired of hanging out with these guys with PhDs, these effete, namby-pamby, know-nothing, do-nothing academics who kind of theorize about democracy. And I want to open a political organization to advocate for democracy and advocate for use of force, military use of force against Cuba, against communist China, against other communist regimes around the world. I want to create an institution that's really serious. Even now in 2022, it will not take long for the people who have blood on their hands to show up at your organization, to come knocking on your door, because that's what they're looking for too. Now, there would have been more of these guys showing up in 1985, and there would have been more of these guys in 1975. If you choose to walk that narrow, crooked path, you're going to meet guys who work for the CIA. You're going to meet guys who were involved in what could be called, with some detachment, who were involved in international terrorism against the Fidel Castro regime in Cuba. What if you open a similar foundation in relation to Laos? What if you open a similar foundation in relation to Cambodia? What if you open a similar foundation in relation to Myanmar, where the civil war is very much ongoing right now? What kind of people show up? Who are you recruiting, and who shows up trying to recruit you? Who donates money to support you? Who becomes your donor class that you're then pandering to? Now, not all those guys are bad. Not all those guys are scary. You can meet and talk to people who were former CIA agents, same way you can talk to people who are experts in ninjutsu and people who really do have blood on their hands. They're not all bad. And, it might actually be an enriching and positive thing in your life to get away from people with PhDs, people who spend their whole life in front of a chalkboard, people living in academia like Cosmic Skeptic, and to talk with people who have hands-on, real-world empirical experience with these things. It might be okay, right? And it might kill you. You might end up hanging around with the wrong bunch of gangsters, and you might end up dead on the floor. There's an example of a cult that I researched, frankly, for reasons that are not worth mentioning here. It's a cult that was connected to animal rights and veganism. So there were several different political and historical themes that interested me. This cult, like many, was founded by a husband and wife team, and it ended up splitting into two groups and changing when the husband and wife team themselves split up. But I eventually found an interview with the male half of the original founding couple as an old man, many decades after these things had come and gone. And the interviewer asked, in the nicest way possible, well, how did you end up as the head of a cult that was linked to several serial killers? Now I'm saying linked to advisedly. This guy, the founder of the cult, along with his wife, he didn't kill anyone. And as he went on to explain, I believe plausibly, when he started this new religious movement, he did not think of it as recruiting serial killers. I'm now going to set out more cogently what his philosophy was at the time than he did in this interview, on the basis of having done quite a lot of reading, including reading their original magazine of the time, which has long since been archived and uploaded to the internet. What he has to say for himself is this. He was interested in the duality of good and evil. He came up with this philosophy. This is very 1960s, reflecting a kind of shallow interest in Friedrich Nietzsche, Buddhism as misunderstood by white people, Taoism as misunderstood by white people, and a kind of Dungeons and Dragons interest in the pre-Christian religions of Europe. He said, well, we're interested in the duality of good and evil and of attaining this state that is beyond good and evil, where you don't think in terms of this duality, you don't feel in terms of this duality. We're turning to a kind of inner wilderness, which, at least in the mature stage of that cult, they symbolize with wolves and dogs. They'd have these big hunting dogs. Ironically, these are domesticated hunting dogs, not wild wolves, actually standing at attention on either side of the altar. Not statues of dogs, but dogs that were alive and trained to remain there. Well, they did these rituals that anyone would perceive as satanic. They wore capes and they had candles and this kind of crap. But for them, the symbol of the dog and of the wolf was salient to this notion of a human being living their life where they just they hunt remorselessly without thinking in terms of good and evil the way a wolf does. They compete for who they're going to mate with. This is a frankly very simplistic notion of a return to wilderness in some respects. They were not actually talking about going out and living in caves or what have you. But he was interested in this duality of good and evil and moving beyond. Okay, so that's the cult leader, the cult founder's perspective of what he was preaching and why. And it didn't occur to him that in Southern California, this was going to bring people into his life who were directly or indirectly, linked to real violence. Okay, what kind of person do you think you're recruiting? So you're doing these rituals, which again, just from an outsider's perspective, we can just call them satanic rituals. I mean, that's what it looks like. It's a Dungeons and Dragons notion of what a evil magical ritual looks like. That's what they're doing. They dress up in the robes with the candles and knives and chanting and this kind of stuff. Okay. And, the actual doctrine you're teaching is about this life beyond good and evil. It has very definite implications for both sex and violence. Well, what kind of person is into that? And I'm not even saying what kind of person are you going to reach who's never thought about this before, and you're converting them to this way of thinking. No. I'm saying that out of a population of more than 100 million people, there are a few people out there who are already thinking along these lines, who are already living with their own philosophy or their own religious beliefs or their own small cult movement. They're already into it, bro. And they're going to seek you out. They're going to join your group. They're going to be recruited by you, or you're going to recruit them. This is already what they've got going on. You see the parallels I'm drawing here? I may have the most pious notion of advocating for democracy in Cuba. If I start that organization, who shows up? Who do I recruit and who tries to recruit me? Who donates money to support me? People who are already into it. Who are those people? A lot of them already have blood on their hands. Whether they worked with the CIA or not, right? A lot of them have decades of experience with opposition to the Fidel Castro regime in Cuba. And now think a few steps ahead about what position does that put you in. Now, I don't really want to spell this out for the vegan movement because I think I talked about that enough 8 years ago, 7 years ago, way back in season 1 on this channel. But it's come up again and again and again. And most people my age, I'm in my 40s, they're really mystifyingly stupid and blind about these things. And I've had to say to people, not just in YouTube videos, but talking one-on-one, okay, if you are coming on YouTube and making this argument that what people need is violent disruption of society on a massive scale, and in the same paragraph, like a couple sentences before, a couple sentences afterwards, you're talking about September 11th and how September 11th caused this sudden dramatic change in world politics. And you're saying now we need something like that in order to bring about a sudden dramatic shift in relation to ecology, in relation to veganism. Guys, this is not rare. So one of the instances of this I criticized on my channel, you can actually see who's sitting in the audience, and they're teenagers. These are not particularly bright teenagers. I mean, maybe some of them were 20 or 21, but like it's being said on a university campus. These are probably 18 and 19-year-old kids sitting there listening to this. what do you think they hear? Now again, some of those people, they're showing up for the first time. Like some of them, they're being conditioned to think this way for the first time starting that day. They're learning this concept of violent disruption, and what that means. They're learning the rules and tactics of politics as you're teaching them, starting from a blank sheet of paper. Okay, and now we can talk about the ethics and practical political outcomes of saying what you're saying that way. Okay, but with time, even if it's just 6 months, people are going to show up to your lectures. People are going to show up to your events. People are going to show up to meet you and get in touch with you. People who are already into it. People who are already thinking the way you're thinking. People who are already doing what you're preaching. People who have been trying to cause mass disruption in order to cause a sudden change in the political climate, the same way September 11th did. What kind of people are those? They may already have blood on their hands. And if not, right, like, again, I get it. I also get tired dealing with these people who only know how to reason standing in front of a chalkboard and lecturing a bunch of teenagers who are effectively silenced because they will be graded by the same person giving the lecture. They're not really at liberty to disagree with or confront the lecturer just because of this relationship of authority, that ultimately what he's writing on the chalkboard is going to be on the test. And if you don't mimic the opinion of the professor, if you don't nod your head and agree and say, oh, that sounds very sagacious, you're not getting an A+ in this course. You're going to be lucky to get a C-. These relations of authority really do silence the audience and force them into this kind of gormless conformity in the university context. Okay, so you get tired of being surrounded by these know-nothing, do-nothing lecturers who can only reason from the pulpit and when standing in front of a chalkboard. And you've made the decision that you want to get out among the men of action. You want to get out amongst the real killers. That's what you hear a lot from vegans on the internet. I've spoken to so many people. And, the one guy where I really tried to change his mind over a period of years is the YouTuber called Cranky Vegan, The Cranky Vegan. I really said to him passionately and sincerely, you either are unaware of the extent to which you're endorsing violence, or you're lying to me about it in this private conversation. Like I understand if you're lying about this publicly, like if this is an intentional strategy on your part, but I don't understand if this is like self-deception, like you're really like sleepwalking through what you're saying about violence. But again, this is stuff I talked about 8 years ago on the channel. If you are publicly saying that you support acts of terrorism, acts of vandalism, let's use a particular example to make it less vague. If you are saying on the internet that you support breaking into a laboratory like a burglar and then taking videotape and destroying things there, breaking into a laboratory on a university campus, who are you recruiting? Who's going to show up who's already into that? And now let's think a few steps ahead. What is that going to lead to? All right. You can claim that you only support burglary and not murder. But once you have people actually breaking through the window and doing that, right? Then they bump into a security guard. They bump into a scientist who was working late at the laboratory that night, right? Like, I think every burglar on earth, every thief, will piously say that they intended to just rob the place nonviolently, right? But they intended to get away with it. So when they happen to bump into somebody, what happens then? Right? People end up with blood on their hands. Oh, and now you got a whole circle of people. They didn't sign up for this. Who can you trust within your own unit, within your own cell? So after this happens, then you got one guy who has blood on his hands, one guy who did the killing, and you got 5 or 6 people who know. Todd here. Todd's a flake. Look at Todd. He's all shaken up. Since he saw that guy die on the floor, since he saw that guy bleed out, he's been falling apart. I think he's going to tell someone. I think he's going to tell his wife, his girlfriend. I think he's going to tell his parents. I think he's going to tell the cops. Todd, we could trust him for years back when we were just doing protests on the sidewalk. But now that it's burglary, now that it's terrorism, now that there's a dead body involved, I don't think we can trust Todd anymore. What do you want to do about it? It's him or you now. So all 5 of you are going to jail if just one of you snitches. What happens next? Oh, I'm sorry, you haven't thought this through. And look, guys, I tried my best with Cranky Vegan. I really did. I tried my best with all kinds of people in the movement who kind of endorse like terrorism light. Like they don't really go as far as terrorism, but they're publicly endorsing the baby steps to lead up to this. I trust you. None of them have thought through what I just explained to you. The very predictable way in which a little bit of violence leads to step by step a whole lot of violence. And the cult leader I alluded to earlier, that guy who founded this cult with his wife, and I'm sure to some extent for him it was all just fun and games. It was all just orgies with people dressed up in funny costumes, and there was sex and scented wine and silly songs and chanting and candlelight and candelabras. And for him also, it was probably not just the money and the sex and the power. I'm sure it was also a chance for him to be a philosopher. It was a chance for him to make his ideas matter and really get out and preach what it was he believed in and the ideas that he had himself authored or devised. I'm sure that was an intoxicating combination of things. Well, he didn't think enough steps ahead to what happens when this is the position you adopt ethically, politically, religiously, so on and so forth. Now, I see your comments as they're coming in, guys. If anyone has anything tremendously intelligent to say, I will read it and I will respond to it. But I don't think I have to join in on this conversation about Chile, Chile versus Uruguay versus Argentina. I've known people from all those countries too. I remember a guy who was still pretty shaken up and damaged from his experience of violence and war in Colombia. There were a lot of guys living with the long shadow of that civil war in Colombia still to this day on all sides of the conflict. Okay. Cosmic Skeptic. In some ways, he's worth criticizing because he's remarkable, he's exceptional, and in some ways, he's worth criticizing because he's typical. He's not the only one preaching neo-utilitarianism. He is not the only one who's taken the particular mix of ideas found in the books of Peter Singer and tried to popularize them in the atheist movement, not just in the vegan movement. He is not the only one who has taken the crudest notion of hedonism, if you prefer, and packaged it as consequentialism, who pretends that this is a moral doctrine to be taken seriously, and who gets out and very actively preaches to people that life is fundamentally about pleasure, about self-indulgence. I have a female friend, and it's necessary for this anecdote to say her behavior, especially in public, is in no way flirtatious. She's someone who has a very kind of cold and perfunctory way of talking to people. She has never been diagnosed with autism, but she's told me that she considers herself autistic, or she wonders if she's autistic or she's self-diagnosed. And, again, I'm not criticizing her. This is just a necessary part of this anecdote. Her manner of speaking to people, it has that stereotypically autistic quality of a kind of flat affect. She has described to me repeatedly having the experience of going to these atheist conferences, these atheist meetups, and having completely cold academic discussions with men there, about her opposition to religion, about the topics being discussed at the event. And these men really, with no warm up, these men sexually assaulting her and trying to initiate sex with her. And she's just shocked and stunned. And she had talked to these men enough to get a sense of their story. I think that's what people share at these conferences. These were men who led an incredibly repressive, devout life up until a certain point, and then rejected religion and started going to these conferences. And they're men who feel that they have to catch up with the sensual self-indulgence they missed out on in their teenage years. And it's horrifying in ways both subtle and obvious. By the way, I don't say that about her, that she has this very cold way of speaking to excuse sexual assault or groping or trying to initiate sex with someone who does present themselves in more of a flirtatious manner. I'm really just trying to emphasize that these were very awkward, distant, cold conversations at an atheist conference. This was nothing like two people who are out on a date together where there's a certain romantic atmosphere and flirtation and so on going on that leads up to miscommunication or signals that can be misinterpreted. I'm just trying to emphasize that these are events where if you had been standing next to them, witnessing them, you would be shocked. Probably you'd wonder if everybody involved was autistic. It's just grossly inappropriate for the circumstances, regarded as a totality. There is a valid argument to be made on a chalkboard that one of the reasons to reject religion is simply to enjoy your own life. It depends which religion we're talking about, but obviously, if you are a homosexual who is living in a state of repressed celibacy because you're a member of a religion that will not allow you to be a homosexual, there's a very obvious contrast between the life you're living while you believe in this religion and after you reject it. I've known some very unhappy marriages produced by religions. I am thinking about one in particular at the moment. But, you can meet a lot of people who were raised in a certain religion. They were only allowed to consider getting married to other people who were part of the same religion or part of the same cult. And they were pushed to both remain a virgin until marriage and also to get married very young, 16 years old, 18 years old, something like that. And then these people later lose faith in the religion. And they also start to feel a sense of disgust and disappointment with their own partner. Now, we get into the details. Maybe it's because their partner still believes in the religion and they don't. But maybe it's just because they feel there's a happier life they could have led if they just even considered marrying a greater variety of people, or if they'd been allowed, in plain English, to sleep around, if they'd had more of a normal libertine upbringing. Okay, so I get it. There is some point to talking these things through on hypothetically on a chalkboard. And in that context, and this is the most sympathetic thing I can say to the people on the other side, I understand why someone like Cosmic Skeptic would become comfortable with thinking about pleasure this way, thinking about the net positive this way. We live in a world in an unbelievable scale on this world, to an extent that's impossible to visualize. Millions on millions of people are living lives that, yes, are less pleasant than they could be because they believe in religions that compel them, for example, to cut off a part of their own penis. Um, and I think it's worth talking about how different life would be for these millions of people if they were not compelled to be a virgin until marriage, if they were not compelled to live in a situation of monogamy after they get married, so on and so forth. You know, it's important for men and women. It's important for gay and straight people. Okay, so I really do understand the kind of intellectual context within which the utilitarian paradigm seems appealing to Cosmic Skeptic, seems appealing to Sam Harris, seems appealing to Richard Dawkins, seems appealing to Peter Singer himself. Okay, I get it. When this is your method of recruiting people, when this is your method of attracting people, who do you think shows up? I don't want to repeat the argument I've already made about having an anti-communist pro-democracy group, let's say in southern Florida, a group that's advocating for the overthrow of the communist regime in Cuba. You know, who shows up? What does your movement become? And with the passage of time, who do you become? Now, in this same way, I really do understand the intellectual context within which these guys are discussing the morality of rape. Like, I understand it's not for no reason at all that they're questioning it biologically, they're questioning it socially, they're questioning it ethically, morally. I understand why these questions are being asked. All right. Who shows up at your conference, whether it is a conference for the future of atheism, a conference for the future of veganism, the future of both? You know, I don't really know what kind of movement Cosmic Skeptic imagines himself as leading at this point. Who shows up when the doctrine you are teaching is one of total commitment to your own selfish, short-term pleasure, and where that commitment runs so deep that the type of moral and political problems you're examining are these problems like rape? And guys, if you don't know what they talk about, they say, well, what about a hypothetical situation in which um, the woman is asleep? Let's say she's been given drugs by her dentist that put her asleep. So she doesn't even suffer. She doesn't even experience the rape. Whereas this is what gets debated within the so-called net positive paradigm, right? This is what matters to them. This is who they are and what they're preaching. And with the passage of time, who do they recruit? Who shows up? Who joins the movement? And it's not an allegory. It's not a metaphor. We're not talking about something else. Okay? You have to take this seriously as a problem unto itself. You have to take seriously what it says about you and me and us and this movement. Right? And you know, my conclusion is I don't want to be a part of the same movement as Peter Singer. I'm vegan, but if that's the definition of vegan, I'm not part of the same vegan movement he is. You know, how you define this is up to you. You can either say Peter Singer is not vegan, or you can say I'm not vegan, but we're not part of the same movement. All right. Even with atheism, I can say, look, if this is your idea of atheism, I'm not part of the same movement as you guys. And again, I don't really care how you define it. Either they're not really atheists or I'm not really an atheist. I have to be put in a separate category. This is totally, radically, fundamentally incompatible, ethically, politically, and in every other way. All right, I'll take a moment to look at your comments again now, guys. Okay, so Paul Heinrich Dietrich says, quote, sure, utilitarianism has its problems. Some have even become memes, such as Nozick's utilitarian monster, but so do all other meta-ethical theories. No one has solved ethics yet. Okay, Paul, I'm here to say to you, 100% seriously, I have solved it. Okay. I know the solution to this. I think any reasonably intelligent person can figure out the solution to this. I do not agree with your fundamental assumption here that this is a question that can be reasoned through and debated endlessly on a chalkboard, the way academics discuss the possibility or impossibility of a spaceship traveling faster than the speed of light. That's a complicated question that has both theoretical and pragmatic dimensions to it. Now, any of you could say, look back at the last 50 years and look ahead at the next 50 years. This question of whether or not we can get a spaceship to move faster than the speed of light, it's been debated on different chalkboards by different experts from different perspectives for 50 years. And look ahead to the next 50 years, this debate is going to go on. Nobody's ever going to solve this question of faster than light travel. Okay, but now I'm not stating this as my opinion or my judgment or my conclusion, but that's an understandable attitude to have toward that kind of debate that almost entirely exists just on a chalkboard. It's academic in every sense of the term. No. Paul, there's something really wrong with you if you think that the morality of rape is this kind of parlor room topic. There's something really fucked up about you if you think this is something that has to be theorized endlessly without any certain solution. Okay? You're wrong. And, I'm a nihilistic atheist. All right? But I am not going to pretend to be humble. I'm not going to exhibit false humility towards you. I'm not going to pretend that I am too stupid or too trepidatious to, one, solve the problem, and then two, go around openly saying, yes, I've solved it, and you can too. All right? I'm not saying that you should arrive at the same position I have without doing the work yourself. I'm not saying that you should accept as an argument from authority my conclusions. I'm saying that step by step, you can walk the same path I've already taken. Visualize a field full of snow. You can step in the same footsteps where I have already trod, and you can figure this out. And if you can't, there's something really wrong with you. All right? And it's not going to take 50 years. And it's not going to take a PhD in philosophy. All right? Now, let's just apply this to where I sort of digressed from my own topic here. So someone's asking, to what extent is this about Peter Singer? It's entirely about Peter Singer, but it's also entirely about other neo-utilitarians, as I've called them. What I'm saying applies also to Cosmic Skeptic. Numerous other popular thinkers of this generation, especially those who are associated with atheism, in my opinion, Sam Harris is another example of someone. This very broadly consequentialist, determinist, neo-utilitarian movement. Where it is they're going, what it is they're trying to accomplish is a very good question. Yeah, good questions from JRM. Thanks for your contributions. Thank you for saying that, JRM. I am generously assuming that Cosmic Skeptic has no idea what he's playing with. That he's not even visualizing this. Okay, but look, in terms of how far these guys will take it, and this to me reflects their own moral illiteracy, their own philosophical incompetence, and their own just lack of any real world understanding of politics. Great comments here. Thanks, guys. Thanks for contributing. I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys showing up. I appreciate you making the effort to say something that's, intelligent and salient to the discussion. I really don't like it when people show up and just start asking me about the ethics of owning a cat. It's like, well, it's kind of not the topic of today's video. I don't really want to get into castrating pet cats today. We've made enough videos, but anyway, thanks for your contributions, even if I don't read them all out, even if I don't get to all of them. I've seen these guys. I mean, I could dig around and get the film clips of it. I've seen these guys debating a question, for example, of why would anyone heroically charge into battle in a circumstance in which, let's say, there's a 90% chance they're going to be killed. It's some kind of suicide mission. Charging into battle in war, quote unquote, heroically from a certain cultural perspective. Why would anyone do that? Now, I can get into what the answers are that they offer from their, again, determinist, consequentialist, utilitarian, or neo-utilitarian perspective. The fact that this is so baffling to these guys, their attitudes in posing the question and problematizing it already tells you a lot about who they are and a lot about who shows up at these events, like who has in effect joined their political party, their movement, or what have you. Who are you attracting? Whether you think of that as passively attracting these people or actively recruiting them. These are people so deeply committed to this life of sensual pleasures, short-term self-indulgence, that it's really baffling to them to look at bravery in contrast to cowardice, to look at self-sacrifice, and they sit there and theorize it. They get out their chalkboard and draw up a formula. And I believe Cosmic Skeptic's current position on this, and you can talk about, okay, well, what answer does Peter Singer give? What answer does Cosmic Skeptic give? And what answer does Sam Harris give? They reason it through and give different kind of hypothetical answers. Say, well, I suppose given that all human behavior is motivated by this reckless pursuit of pleasure and immediate pleasure, okay, well, it must be that when the man charges into battle, he thinks or he feels that he would be happier to die now in this heroic self-sacrificing act than he would be to live a long life, to live for another 50 years with the knowledge that he was a coward. That must be so. It must be that there's an experience of pleasure and an experience of pain that fits into this matrix we've got of the so-called pleasure-pain calculus. And okay, now we can reason it through. Now, look, guys, if you want to understand war and the psychology of, violence on the battlefield, you would learn more reading novels from the 19th century. There have been great novels written by men who were veterans of like the Napoleonic Wars. You can read, autobiographical writing and diaristic writing from people who fought in the French Revolution, fought in the Napoleonic Wars. I could choose many other wars. Now, admittedly, it's hard to find an author who's really going to be honest with you, but some are. Some are. You would learn more from reading ancient Greek and ancient Roman writing on this topic. Look at these fucking losers. And I'm sorry, but let's really point the finger at Peter Singer. Let's really point the finger at Cosmic Skeptic. And let's dare to ask, what the fuck do you know about rape? What the fuck do you know about war? What the fuck do you know about violence? And as soon as we let ourselves think that, right, it's the crack in the facade that then lets you question everything else. What the fuck do you know about hunting? What the fuck do you know about surviving on a desert island? What the fuck do you know about ethics and morality, whether it is in the most banal of circumstances or the most extraordinary, like your airplane crashed and you're on a desert island? Once you let yourself see how stupid and malicious these people are, you begin to question their whole philosophy. And look, there are two big coincidences here. They are atheist and I am atheist. They are vegan and I am vegan. So I may be biased as powerfully as it is possible to be biased in their favor. I may want to sympathize with what it is they're saying. I may want to sympathize with their objectives, for example, of having a world. Let's just say this hypothetically. I'm certain all these guys would agree. It would be wonderful to live in a world where everyone is vegan, where the meat industry doesn't exist. They would prefer that. If they could flip a switch, they'd accomplish it. Now, we may disagree about everything else, like what we're doing next weekend to try to change the world. Okay, I'm sure all these guys would agree with that. And on the issue of rape, if they could flip a switch and have zero rape in the world for the future, I'm sure all these guys would agree to that too, right? Like, I don't think they morally disagree with me to that extent, right? But their reasoning on these issues, it discredits them as philosophers. It discredits them as political leaders. And what they're doing over time, it discredits the movement. It discredits any movement they're a part of, any movement predicated on utilitarianism. Now, I'm coming back to this example, this female friend of mine who may or may not be autistic. Again, she diagnoses herself as autistic. She's never had a diagnosis. And she's talked through with me her symptoms, and it's credible. She has a case. So this woman goes to these atheist conferences, very much the same conferences these guys attend, these big events. And she has this repeated experience of men, specifically men who were raised in repressive religions, and men who now feel like their life ought to be an orgy. Their life ought to just be this crazy, freewheeling, polyamorous, sexual self-indulgence always, and who have some kind of agenda. They have a chip on their shoulder. They have an onus on them to get out there and try to live because they feel like they were deprived of the experience of sleeping around when they were younger. Okay, so that's a predictable psychological pattern. That's a type you can encounter empirically again and again and again. Look at the message Cosmic Skeptic is putting out there. Who shows up? Who shows up at his events? Who is donating money to support him? It's those guys, all right? Who is it that's deeply engrossed in these questions of under what circumstances you justify rape in what ways? Now, I want to say this again. It's not hypothetical. It's not. This is real. This is actual. This has real effects on how people are living their lives right now, next weekend, next month. All right, I'll give you some examples to flesh it out. But even on the chalkboard, when Cosmic Skeptic gets on camera addressing Michaelia Peterson and addressing the meat-eating carnivore audience of Michaelia Peterson, when he sits down to debate someone who advocates for a 100% meat diet, someone who publicly claims, and in my opinion, falsely claims, to have cured her own mysterious ailments and to have cured other people's diseases by recommending a 100% meat diet, when he sits down in that debate and he engages in a justification of meat eating, and specifically a justification based on this utilitarian pleasure-pain calculus, when he says, as long as you are trying to maximize pleasure and minimize suffering, it's okay. When he says, as long as you subjectively believe you need to eat meat, not a scientific criterion, not that you're in a hospital bed and under doctor's orders, no. You just subjectively and psychologically feel that you need to eat meat in order to be happy. He is making the statement, you can go ahead, and he gives the example of hunting and killing an animal, but obviously also go to the grocery store and buy meat and eat meat. That is his position. It's not hypothetical. He is giving advice to people in the real world, and they already are following his advice. This is going on right now. He's concurring with Michaelia Peterson, and he's backing up her reasoning with his own reasoning, with his own philosophizing that agrees with it, endorses it, rubber stamps it, and in some ways goes further. This is an act. This is a political act. It's an action. Actions have consequences. He said that you can call yourself a vegan while being a hunter who kills a deer and eats the deer's flesh, just as long as you subscribe to his chalkboard reasoning about utilitarianism, okay? There are people in the audience who are really living this way, and to some extent, he himself is living this way. To some extent, his own friends who we know about through YouTube, they really are living this way. They are taking this notion of pleasure and pain, that life is all about pleasure, all about enjoyment, and they're applying it. They're applying it to their own lives as best they can. it's not always going to have disastrous consequences. I'm not saying there's going to be a huge number of people who go to prison for rape because of what he's preaching. But I am saying that his philosophy is fundamentally bad and evil and wrong. If communists get out and preach class struggle, communists who get out and preach literally killing the rich, a very small percentage of the people they preach to are going to end up in jail for attempting to put that philosophy into practice. It nevertheless has a devastating negative impact on people's lives to believe in communism. The same way it has a devastatingly negative impact on your life if you believe in Christianity or you believe in Islam. Even if you don't go to war, you don't go to jihad, like you don't believe in Islam enough to become a terrorist. You just pray and follow the rules and all this other shit. You just live a moderately Islamic life. It still fucks up your whole life. Well, guess what? Believing in utilitarianism, believing specifically in the version of utilitarianism preached by Peter Singer and Cosmic Skeptic, I can say to you honestly, it is worse than most mainstream religions. All right? For most mainstream religions, rape is not mysterious in this way. Heroism and self-sacrifice, whether it be in war or in charity work, is not mysterious in this way. I can say to you genuinely, you would be better off converting to Theravada Buddhism, converting to the ancient traditional form of Buddhism, which, by the way, it includes believing in ghosts. It includes believing in things I do not. It's simple as well. That's a better ethical philosophy than what all of these neo-utilitarians are preaching, including Cosmic Skeptic, including Peter Singer. A great question. What do you think of Tolstoy? Try Stendhal. Do you know Stendhal? If that's what you want, you can join my reading of Stendhal. Yeah, I'm pretty, I have read Tolstoy. I appreciate some things about Tolstoy, but I'm a pretty harsh critic of Tolstoy. Just being real with you. Okay, perfectly reasonable question from Justin. Justin, I'm not offended by your question, but don't be offended by my answer. My honest answer is read my book. Now, unlike all these other phonies who say they want to save the world and then try to sell you a book for $45, my book costs $1. You can download it and read it on your mobile phone. Download it from Amazon. $1. And I don't know how much money I make out of that. I assume I make maybe 15 cents. Like it's almost zero because I put the price to be minimum. Now, if I charged you $15 for that book, it'd be a lot of money for each sale. Okay. Justin, I totally am willing to treat your question as sincere, but you've got to treat my answer as sincere. The book is about 120 pages long. It's called Veganism, the Future of an Illusion. All right. And if that is not enough for you, my other book is 600 pages long. All right. This one's over 600 pages. And that is called No More Manifestos. All right. Get it now before we correct the typos. This is the edition that has the typos still in it. It'll be a collector's item. The more typos, the better. All right. Yeah, look at that. Look at how I've aged. Look at how I've aged since that portrait was made. All right. So, Justin, these are questions I've already answered on the YouTube channel. These are questions I've answered definitively in the books, just 2 books. So thank you for your question. Now take my answer seriously. This book will change your life if you let it. I know it's a lot to ask, but I mean, take it on one chapter at a time. This book will change your life if you let it. These YouTube videos change people's lives. In the space of 4 days, I had 3 different people get in touch with me and let me know that they had quit drugs and alcohol because of this YouTube channel. 2 of them had quit drinking alcohol, and it was not easy for them. I mean, there's some people, whatever, they only drink 1 beer a week and they quit. It's no big deal. These were 2 people for whom it was a significant struggle to quit alcohol, and they did it because of this channel. I have 44 people in the audience right now and only 26 thumbs up. It's because you don't want your name linked to this video, isn't it? Well, I'd appreciate it if you gave me a goddamn thumbs up, you pieces of shit. How many people did you convince to quit doing drugs and alcohol this week? All right, so 2 of them wrote to me with that, and a different guy, a third guy, wrote to me talking about his decision to quit smoking marijuana, which for him was a huge change in his life and 100% a result of what he heard about on this channel. Okay? The philosophy I'm putting forth on this channel, it does change people's lives. And I am going to make a reckless claim here. I think in 100% of cases, it changes people's lives for the better. Prove me wrong. Who the fuck has watched this channel, quit drinking alcohol, quit smoking marijuana, quit playing video games, and then said, oh, holy shit, my life was better before? None. Now let's turn this around and apply it to goddamn Cosmic Skeptic. Any of the neo-utilitarians. Sam Harris, Peter Singer. You are surrounded by drug addicts. Even on the campus of Cambridge University, England, even on the campus of Oxford University, England. This message you're preaching, that life is about pleasure in this sense, the net positive, who do you think it convinces to even quit smoking marijuana? Who do you think it convinces to commit themselves to a life of sobriety? Who do you think it convinces to go to Cambodia and do humanitarian work? I've had that effect on people. None of you will be surprised. Of course, people write to me asking for advice about doing humanitarian work. Nobody is going to respond to this fucking message you're delivering, Cosmic Skeptic, by thinking in these ways they should live a better life and they should struggle to make the world a better place. I got this fucking scarf doing humanitarian work in Cambodia. And this is a source of conflict because this scarf identifies you as anti-communist. And there are other people there, other white people who are pro-communist, who get in your face about it. I wish I was fucking joking. I never had a problem with Cambodian people who are pro-communist. There are other white people, there are fucking French people in Cambodia who still support Pol Pot, who still support that fucking regime. And they'll let you know about it. You know, my channel and my philosophy, it pushes people to that limit where they question, and again, fine, like this guy Justin, right? Like a lot of people would just kind of make fun of you for saying this, Justin. You're like, well, look, should you be concerned about killing insects? And so, okay, all right, should you be concerned with not owning a car? Okay, I'm not going to make fun of you. I'm going to take that seriously and think, okay, this is someone who, you know, they're really concerned with how do I live with this philosophy? Given that this is what I know, how do I live with what I know? Okay, and I'm taking some ownership for this. My philosophy, what I preach on YouTube when I explain the books, I understand how you are going to feel forced into a corner where you now have to make hard decisions about how you live your life in relation to climate change, how you live your life in relation to killing animals, even insects, right? I put you in that corner, so I understand that you're asking those questions, and I did my best, you know, to give you the answers in what I think is a definitive and final form. I don't want to write this book again. I don't want to write a sequel. This is it. Okay? What I'm asking you all to recognize is the corner that Cosmic Skeptic's philosophy pushes people into. It pushes people into this fucking corner where what they're dealing with is not that they're surrounded by methamphetamine addicts, not that they're surrounded by fentanyl addicts, by marijuana addicts, that we live in a society that is falling apart because of drug addiction, including prescription drug addiction. It instead forces people into a corner where they are debating the morality of rape because they see life as definitively being about this kind of immediate, self-indulgent pleasure. That is, for them, the meaning of life. So the problem becomes, what is problematized? rape. What is not problematized? What about the idea that the whole world would be a better place? It would be net positive if everyone started taking a pill that would make you happy. For some reason, this isn't what they're philosophizing about. This isn't their concern at all. Hey guys, what's the net positive for letting Vladimir Putin conquer Ukraine, or at least conquer half of it? Hey guys, what's the net positive for letting communist dictatorship in China go on and on forever? Hey, how much suffering would be involved? How many people would have to die to bring democracy to communist China? Oh, and guess what's happening next? There used to be democracy in Hong Kong. There still is democracy in Taiwan, and communist China is snuffing it out step by fucking step. Utilitarianism is the apotheosis of cowardice. Utilitarianism is the apotheosis of sensual self-indulgence. It is a philosophy by and for the most despicable people in the world. That's who you are, Cosmic Skeptic. That's who you are, Sam Harris. And whether passively or actively, that is the kind of person you are recruiting.